Hey everybody, so today I am here to share our 12-week missed miscarriage story. This is something that I've been waiting to do until everything was settled, until I felt like I was in a good enough spot to make this video, because I feel like, I'm going to be going over everything that happened, giving you guys from point A to point B, and that's going to stir up a lot of stuff. The physical aspects of the miscarriage carried out for a lot longer than I expected, so I was also waiting on that because, this is going to be beneficial for myself to just kind of put this out there and to tell my story from beginning to end. But also, if there's anybody out there going through this right now, as I know that I did, I was looking for videos and, I wanted to hear about what other people's experiences were. So, like I said, I'm just here to tell my story from when everything started happening to when everything started to kind of fall apart. So, I guess I will start by saying that, firstly, if you are new to my channel or my videos, my name is Alia. I just turned 25 years old. Me and my husband have 2 living children, and we started to try and conceive in January of 2018. We had waited a really long time to do this. We started wanting a kid back in January 2017, but we wanted to meet financial goals first. We wanted to do some stuff, and after we met those, we just thought maybe it'd be best to try and plan a pregnancy in January 2018 and just try from then on. January was not successful, however, February was. If you guys watched my trying to conceive update, you'll know that my cycles started being very different. They were just changing compared to what they had been for the past previous years, and I was starting to try and get a handle on that. Everything was changing, how long my cycles lasted, how long my periods lasted, the symptoms of my period. It was just a very hard time for me to understand what was going on. And honestly, in February, I had no idea. Like, I didn't think that we had a shot to be pregnant, honestly, because I had ovulated on day 23 of my cycle. It was so extremely late. It was such kind of like a mess that I just figured, like, okay, just scrap this month, we'll start over next, and we'll just work from there. So we did test on March 4th, and much to our surprise, it was positive, and it was like not a squinter or anything. We tested at 11 days past ovulation. I can't remember how many days until my period, but I think there was at least a few, and it was just such a shock because I really expected it to be negative because I wasn't even sure if when I ovulated had been right or if it was wrong, and all kinds of different variables about that cycle. And sure enough, I took a digital right after. We got a positive on a first response, and that came back positive as well. And then over the next, I think it was like 5 to 6 days, I was taking tests and they progressively got darker. And it really felt like, okay, this is a viable pregnancy. Like, this is really happening and this is really awesome. And we were just like literally over the moon. And as I've mentioned in other videos, we had a lot going on in our lives at that time, and we had just, I don't know, we just had this period of like everything felt like it was working out. There was just so many good things going on that this just kind of like, again, put us over the moon, and we were just so excited and so happy. Of course, I called my OBGYN and I scheduled an appointment. My doctor wanted to see me at 10 weeks. However, since there was such a discrepancy with when I ovulated, they had me come in when they thought I would be 10 weeks. But since I ovulated close to 2 weeks past what I thought I should be, or what my doctor's office estimates people to ovulate at, that I felt like I was going to be not even 8 weeks at that appointment. But they said to just still come in. So that's when we booked our appointment, and we just kind of spent those, next 4 weeks waiting around for that appointment. And it was a great pregnancy. Honestly, I was expecting to be really sick and just not feeling great, because with our youngest daughter, that's how my pregnancy was. I was super, super sick the first trimester and even past that, but it was worse than the first. And I wrote down some of the symptoms because I did have some, but I was just extremely moody, honestly, which was something that I hadn't really experienced in pregnancy. Like, obviously you can be more sensitive and emotional, but I was just like moody all the time. I also was really, really tired. Those of you who have been around for a while might know that I have had sleep troubles over this past year, year and a half. And when I got pregnant, I had no problem sleeping anymore. It was really great. I always felt super well rested. I could just get like a nice deep sleep in. And I also had really tender boobs. They were just achy and sore like almost all the time. I had a lack of an appetite. I was not sick. I don't know. I really wasn't hungry a lot of the time. And I had a lot of headaches, but that was about it. That was the extent of it. But the headaches really weren't even that bad. They were pretty mild. And like I said, we just spent the first few weeks just waiting for that appointment. And I feel like waiting for that appointment, I definitely hold my breath, it feels like, during that whole time, you know, because I know so many things can go wrong. And for those of you who might not know, I have had 2 miscarriages prior to this one. We had a miscarriage in November of 2013, and that was a natural miscarriage. It happened all on its own. And then we conceived our daughter Sophie, we had her. We conceived our daughter Remy, we had her. And then I had a chemical pregnancy in February of 2017. And then the story that I'm telling you right now. So I've had miscarriages in the past, and I think that that has just added to my kind of apprehension about the first trimester. I'm just very like hesitant and cautious, but this time I was determined to make it different. With both Remy and Sophie's pregnancies, I regret the fact that I did not enjoy them sooner, because if it hadn't worked out, it doesn't make the pain any less, in my opinion. And when the pregnancy is successful, I just ended up regretting it. So I was really out to try and enjoy this pregnancy literally as much as I could. And that's what I tried to do. So I did have doubts, I had fears, I was nervous and anxious and everything under the sun, but I was also trying to enjoy it. And today I am pregnant. Today I'm enjoying this. You know, I just very much let myself live in that moment, and I am so happy now looking back. I'm so happy that I did, because I have great memories of that. So the day finally comes for the ultrasound, and I was super nervous. My husband went with me, but we actually got to see an ultrasound of a flickering little heartbeat. We got to hear it. It was great. Everything looked normal, but I was right about my ovulation date. So they thought I was going to be around 10 weeks, but I was actually around 8 weeks. I was 7 weeks, 6 days of that ultrasound. And that was exactly what I had on my trackers, saying that I had ovulated late. So it lined up with what I thought, but everything was fine. And that kind of made sense once we put everything together, and I looked right on track. So after that appointment, everything went so smoothly that we just went ahead and we booked the appointment for another 4 weeks, and I was going to be 12 weeks and so many days whenever that appointment was going to happen. And for the next few weeks, everything seemed fine. Having that ultrasound put a lot of my doubts and fears to rest. With our previous miscarriages, we had never made it to an appointment to see a growing baby and then miscarried. So for me, it was a milestone, and it was like, okay, well, you know, we met that. So a lot of my fears is over. And honestly, with what my doctor told me, you know, hearing the heartbeat, seeing the fetus and everything, it significantly lowers your chances of miscarriage. So, you know, you are right to feel like, oh, I've made it over this hurdle. It feels great. However, just over the weeks, my doubts still didn't go away. And, you know, I was telling Mark things like there's such things as miscarriages where everything seems fine, but it's not, and you won't know it until it's evident. And I was really afraid of that, because it was something that I hadn't experienced before. I thought it'd be a horrible thing to go through. And I don't know, it was just something that I kept thinking about. And again, I still had these fears, and I was still nervous. I wanted to make it out of the first trimester. I was still waiting for that 13-week mark where I could feel like I could actually exhale. But at the same time, I was trying to enjoy my pregnancy. We bought things. We bought quite a few things, and I looking back, I don't regret that. I don't wish that I hadn't. We were having a great time. To me, buying things for a pregnancy, it's like an investment in my confidence. Like me saying, okay, I believe in this pregnancy. It's gonna make it. We're gonna bring home a living baby. And it's just like my way of being like, I'm all in. And it felt great. We were having such a great time, and it just felt so, so good. Even though I had those fears and reservations about things, I was still allowing myself for the majority of my pregnancy to really enjoy it and take it on. And it just felt so great. And I have a lot of great memories. And the next part is not meant to scare anybody. It's just part of my story, and I want to share it because this is where honesty comes into play. I had gotten a fetal Doppler after our first miscarriage. I've used it with both Sophie and Remy. And with Remy, I picked up her heartbeat at around 10 weeks. And that was such a relief to us. It provided us with just like a lot of peace of mind. And I pulled it out at around 10 weeks and we didn't hear anything. And let me say that it's completely normal to not hear anything. Unless you're a medical professional who uses this tool day in and day out, there's going to be a lot of margin for error. There's going to be a lot of different reasons why you might not hear a heartbeat that can be completely normal and you have a healthy, growing pregnancy. So just because you don't hear anything doesn't mean something's wrong. But for me, it didn't feel great because I knew what I had been able to do this with Remy. So, we were like, well, I do have a tilted uterus. That can make it harder. The placenta could be growing in the front this time, so that also makes it harder. We were very much trying to tell ourselves it's fine. And so we would give it a few days and we would try again. And then we waited for 11 weeks and then we tried again. And then we waited for a few more days and then we tried again, and it just wasn't happening. No matter what I did, no matter what I tried, empty bladder, full bladder, side lying, after a meal, before a meal, first thing in the morning, fasting, it didn't matter. Nothing changed the fact that the only sound we could hear was my placenta and my arteries. And we just could not find the baby's heartbeat. So I was pretty convinced that, okay, well, maybe it's just, my placenta's in the front and that's why. But again, it just didn't make me feel great. Like I just really felt like by 12 weeks, because I had hit 12 weeks and we still weren't finding it, that I was like, this is starting to not make sense to me. And I knew that going into my 12-week appointment that there wouldn't be an ultrasound, just the Doppler to make sure everything was fine. And it was going to be one of those in and out appointments. And I kind of thought to myself, if I can't find it and I'm spending a lot of time and I'm trying these different things, how is somebody who, from my experience, they weren't doing all the different tricks I was, I was propping myself over pillows and all kinds of different stuff. And I just felt like they're going to have a hard time finding it. So I feel like, I don't know. And I feel like as the days went on, my fears and my doubts took over a little bit more. I was still trying to focus on having a good, positive, healthy pregnancy. And I will never forget this. It's just stuck in my mind. It replays over and over like a movie that I can just see so crystal clear, like it's right in front of me. But Mark was out helping one of his friends move, and I was making the girls dinner. Well, me and the girls dinner. And I was standing there and they were playing in the living room, and I felt something. Like I felt not necessarily a gush or anything. I just felt like wetness down there, and I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. So I quickly went to the bathroom, and when I wiped, there was a lot of kind of mucousy discharge, and it was tinged with blood. And it wasn't all red, it was just had almost like strips of coagulated blood in there. And that's where I kind of lost it. And I just kept saying no over and over and over again. And then I kept wiping, and the tissue was pink, and there was some pink discharge and stuff. Again, nothing super bright red or anything. But I just kept being like, this can't be happening. This is not what's supposed to happen. And I immediately called Mark, and I just, with everything that had happened, with us not finding a heartbeat, it had been you know, a month since the ultrasound and stuff, I just wanted to go to the emergency room. Seeing that blood just tipped the scales in favor of my doubts and my fears, and it was too much for me, and I just wanted to go get checked out because at that point it was something that I did not want to ignore. I also forgot to mention that that day and also the day before I had felt pressure. I thought I was constipated because it felt like kind of that pain where you can't go to the restroom and you sit down and everything just feels like kind of like tight and smushed together and just like a lot of pressure. But as the days progressed and as we found out the news and stuff like that, it just progressively got worse, which I think was just like my body getting ready to do what it needed. And we went to the emergency room, and honestly, by the time Mark got home, someone had came over to watch the girls and be able to put them to bed for us and everything, and we had got to the hospital. I wasn't bleeding, and I guess I should also say that too, it wasn't active bleeding, like a period if you think of that. So by the time we walked into the emergency room, I felt like maybe we were being a little bit silly and overreacting and everything was fine, because you know, light spotting can be normal. Like bleeding in the first trimester is actually pretty common from what I understand. So it's not, you know, a for sure sign that things are wrong. But we went regardless since we were already there, and we just figured, you know, best case scenario, you know, they're going to tell us that everything is fine and that's going to make us feel so much better. So they took my blood immediately once I got there, and then we had to wait a little bit for the ultrasound, and they took me down for that. And the way our emergency room works is that the tech can't tell you anything. She has to send it to a radiologist who has to read it and send his results to the emergency room doctor, and that emergency room doctor will give you the results. So she wasn't able to tell me anything, but she was wearing glasses, and I could see my uterus, and I could see like that black kind of circle looking thing where you think that the baby's supposed to be inside. I don't know if that's technically like the sac or whatever, but it was pretty significant. However, I couldn't make out a baby in the reflection, and you know, like there's not supposed to be a huge circle and no baby inside of it. You know, like the baby's supposed to take up a good portion of that circle that you see. I just remember thinking, I don't know for sure, but like I should be able to see a baby in the reflection of her glasses. But I kept telling myself, like, you are going off of something that is just out there. Like, you don't know for sure about anything. She was very, very nice to me, and I just kept trying to read into all these little things. You know, she said something to me like, oh, I hope you guys get out of here soon. And I was like, oh, okay, so everything must have been great, and, you know, they're going to give us the news and we can go home. You know, like I was literally scrambling to hold on till any shred of hope that everything was fine. I don't even know how long it was. Maybe like 45 minutes, an hour. And I just can remember this so vividly again. It's just like one of those things, just like when everything started. I can see it so clearly that I was on the hospital bed and Mark was in a chair, and we were joking back and forth because again, we still had hope because I really wasn't bleeding anymore or anything, that everything was fine. And he was trying to make me laugh and make me feel better. And out of my peripheral vision, because our door was open, I could see the doctor walking towards us. And it's just like one of those moments that I look back on, and it was like the last, it was like those last few minutes of like absolute joy that nobody had ruined. Like not all hope was lost, you know, like just one of those moments that will always stick with me. And like I wonder all the time what she had to think, like looking into that room, knowing what she had to tell us and like seeing us be semi-okay. Like that has to be one of the hardest jobs in the world. And I feel like she had a lot of empathy for us because she was really kind. She took her time, and she was just like, she was a really great doctor. But so she came into the room and she had closed the door and sat down at the foot of my bed. And she said the ultrasound didn't look great, which I immediately think, okay, well that's fine, but we can work with that, right? Like, and she said the baby doesn't look to be 12 weeks along, because at this point I was 12 weeks in 3 days. And she said, the baby looks to be around 8 weeks. And I was like, well, that's okay. That's fine. Like, we can work with that. Like, not rationally thinking, just again, trying to hold on to hope. And she said, and there's no longer any cardiac activity. And that's when, like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I know she said more, but I honestly can't really remember it. And I know she was talking to me, but it was just like, as soon as she said those words, like, I knew it was done, because we had seen and heard the heartbeat. So for her to say that there wasn't one just wasn't right, along with the size. And I just knew right then and there that, like, it was done. And I asked her and I said, so this is a miscarriage? And she said yes. And, you know, she said she was sorry, and she kind of sat there for a bit with us. And I was like, I was crying, but like I was trying my hardest to not like let my full out sobs out in front of this doctor. And she just kind of explained that, like, you know, she would write me a prescription for pain meds if I wanted them, but, you know, trying to describe what was going to happen, even though everyone there knew that I had already had 2 miscarriages. So like I kind of felt like I knew what to expect. And she was very sympathetic, but I said no to the pain meds because, quite frankly, my last 2 miscarriages, they were painful, but it was all over within just a few hours. So I said no, and we just kind of got everything gathered, and we definitely broke down in that room, like getting ready to leave. And it was just, it's one of the worst experiences of your life, you know? I don't know how else to describe it. There's nothing really else to say about it. But eventually, like, we gathered ourselves and we left and we went home. My grandma had been watching the girls, so we came home. And the next morning I got up and I felt a lot more pressure. I also had cramping, the bleeding had came back, and my back hurt really bad. And Mark took the girls outside and played, and I tried to stay by the door with the door open with a heating pad on me, and to just like sit there and try to enjoy them, because like while we were really sad, you know, there was nothing else to do other than to just like wait for this to happen. So, you know, and I didn't hide from the girls if I was crying. You know, if I cried in front of them, and I just explained that I was upset. And it was like the sweetest thing, because Sophie would be like, don't be upset, mommy, I love you, and stuff like that. And it's like they make you feel so good and like so sad all at the same time. You know, like, it was like, she's just the sweetest little girl, and her saying those little things meant so much. But it also made me sad that like she has to see me like this. And, you know, Sophie has asked for a baby for literally, I'm not even kidding, 2 years now. Like, as soon as we had Remy, she wanted another one. And it just made me really, really sad for her. And so in the morning, when everything had kind of kicked up, I felt pretty much okay. Like, in pain, but nothing worse than what happens during my period. However, as the day progressed, I got into more and more pain. I feel like it happened rather quickly looking back, because when we woke the girls up, I was still able to walk around and play with them, change diapers, like do everything. I wasn't feeling the greatest, but I could still do those. But as the day got on, I didn't want to stand, I didn't want to walk. I just felt more and more like crap as the day went on. And it just felt like it was draining me more and more. Like, I couldn't stand upright because that's how much pain was happening in my abdomen and how much back pain I had. And I really can't tell you a whole lot about what happened next, because it's a blur of pain, an absolute blur of pain. But I know that Mark eventually brought the girls inside, because it was becoming to a point where I really couldn't get up myself or down myself or anything like that. And it felt so constant. It was like these waves of pains, which the doctor later told me that they were probably like contractions. And I was laying on this couch, And Mark just kept begging me to go back to the ER, but I didn't want to because I kept telling him that, you know, my past miscarriages, this is what happens, and then you pass stuff and you'll feel better. So I kept saying no because I thought I was on the brink of feeling better eventually. Just give it 30 minutes and things will move along and it'll be fine. No matter how many times I had him help me get to the bathroom and try to sit there, try to stand up and rock back and forth, I tried everything. I was squatting, I was like anything to get things moving, and it wasn't happening. And I was just laying on this couch, and you just get to a point with the pain where you're like, it sounds really melodramatic, but it was like, I will do anything to stop this. It's like, am I gonna make it out of this? That's literally how much pain I was in. And I had enough. It was to the point where it was like blinding pain. Blinding. I couldn't think, I couldn't move, nothing else was even in my world other than this pain right now. So Mark quickly got somebody to come over, my grandma, to watch the girls and take them over to her house for the night because we figured I'd probably be in the hospital for at least a little bit. And he drove me to the hospital, and again, just I felt kind of silly going back also because I had been there. I had denied pain meds when they offered them to me last night, but I honestly didn't expect this. But I think that they could see that things were a lot different this time around, and they were really quick to get me an IV, and they started giving me pain meds right away, which did not really do anything. I could still feel a good portion of it, enough to be in pain every time like one of those waves or contractions, whatever you want to call them, would like hit. I could still feel most of it, and it would hurt so bad. It basically just dulled the pain in between them. Like my back didn't hurt as much and stuff. I didn't feel as much pressure. But while I was there, basically things started progressing. They wanted to just kind of monitor me, and I ended up having the same doctor and the same nurses the night before, which was really nice because they knew what had all happened, and it's not like everybody needed to be caught up. And again, they were some of the most sympathetic and empathetic healthcare workers I've ever came across. It was just really nice to have them there, like a familiar face. And I spent all day in pain, and eventually the doctor told me that she checked me and she said that I was dilated to the point that she thought was like the most, and she felt like I wasn't gonna do a whole lot on my own, so she was going to try and help me. And basically she was gently trying to move things along, and she didn't do anything that hurt me or that wasn't having it. You know, she wasn't gonna do anything to make things worse or to force things. It was just to help things along, and it really did, because I was at the point where pain meds didn't feel like they were doing anything. She said there's no sense in you just keep getting medicine opposed to trying to move things along so you get out of this pain for good. So she tried once with a pelvic exam, and they were able to remove a little bit of tissue, and then we kind of gave it a break because it just seemed like things didn't want to progress more than that, so we left it alone. It was about 3 hours later they came back, and we did another one where she was able to remove even more of it. She said she believed that she got most of it, and honestly after that I did feel the best. I still wasn't out of pain, but it was nothing compared to what I had been in. Like, that pain had been the worst of my life. I would put it on a 9, if not a 10, easily. And after everything, I was back down to like a 3 or a 4. So I was really thankful for her. And like I said, she was just so sympathetic, and she did everything she could to do to help me. And you know, she just let me wait in that emergency room all day and just kind of like be there and try to help me. I don't know that if it had been any other doctor that I would have been that lucky. I was expecting for them to give us pain meds and then to send us home, and she did so much more than that. The nurses did so much more than that, and I'll be forever grateful for that, because I don't know that if she hadn't helped me move things along, I think I would have been in that pain for days. I think that I would have had a tremendously awful time with it. When I had called my OB on Monday morning to tell them everything that had happened, I actually had the 12-week appointment the next day on Tuesday, and they said, keep your appointment. It'll just obviously be a very different one. We'll talk about everything then. So we kept that appointment, and just to give you guys a timeline, we found out we were pregnant on March 4th. We found out that we were going to miscarry on May 5th, and May 6th is when I spent that day in the hospital and all that pain. And like I said, I was 12 weeks and 3 days when they told us, and the next day at 12 weeks and 4 days, that's when I started to pass things. I don't even know if you can consider it 12 weeks and 4 days, whatever, but nonetheless. So we went to the appointment. My doctor actually performed another ultrasound on me to see how things were, and she said that most of the tissue had passed. There was a little bit and also some blood, but it was very low to my cervix, and she was pretty confident that I could pass it on my own. But she wanted to repeat an ultrasound in a month just to make sure that everything had passed, because if it hadn't, I would need a D&C. And that's when we got to talking about things. Firstly, I asked her about my Hcg levels when I went to the hospital, because nobody had really talked about it, and it had dawned on me after the fact that I hadn't even asked. And she said that when I was supposed to be 12 weeks and 3 days, my levels were at 6,200, and that's nowhere in the ballpark of where they need to be. If I remember correctly, they need to be at least in the 5 to 6 figure range, and obviously I wasn't. And that right there shows that obviously things had been bad for a while and we just hadn't known. And based off of their ultrasound, again, it just seemed like the baby's heart stopped beating shortly after our ultrasound, where we saw everything was okay. So around 8 weeks, everything kind of took a turn for the worse, but my body kept trying to keep it going. And that's when I talked to her about the fact that I had still had symptoms even after 8 weeks. And, you know, my body obviously hadn't done anything for 4 weeks. And she said that this is part of a miscarriage where the placenta tries to carry on and it's still trying to produce the things that it needs to do because it just hasn't gotten the message. And eventually your body might, which in my case, I think that's what was starting to happen, was my body had gotten it and understood that this was no longer a viable pregnancy. And it does make sense to me because I did have symptoms. I could hear my placenta on the Doppler, but I couldn't hear anything else. And she reassured me that she thought that I could carry a term pregnancy because I do have 2 healthy living children. She thinks that, she said she wouldn't ever call it bad luck, but it's just an unfortunate thing that has happened to us multiple times. And that this isn't certainly a common kind of miscarriage, but it does happen, which made me feel less alone, because I was just like beside myself, you know. To me, this was my worst nightmare, you know. To me, having had miscarriages before, I see this 13-week mark as this huge milestone. I'm free. Like, I know that you're not, because anything can happen at any time in a pregnancy. But to me, what I've been through, it meant the world to get to 13 weeks. And I was 12 weeks and 3 days. I was so close. I felt like I was just 4 days away and everything was fine. And all of a sudden, it wasn't fine. Like, we had gotten so close to that point, but yet we hadn't at the same time. It was like I was pregnant for 12 weeks and 3 days, but my, you know, the baby had been done long before that. And that's a really hard thing to grasp too, because I felt like I was suffering the loss of a 12-week pregnancy, not an 8-week one, but the baby had stopped growing at 8 weeks. And that's just a lot of hard things to wrap your mind around. So, you know, we just talked with our doctor and everything, and we talked about testing and early testing next time, maybe more ultrasounds next time and different stuff like that. And unfortunately, the position I'm in the United States, you know, our insurance, you do have to pay for quite a bit of stuff if it's not deemed medically necessary. So right now, because you need 3 miscarriages in a row for it to be deemed medically necessary, any extra testing would be straight out of our pockets. And lab testing is the most expensive in our case. The ultrasounds might be doable whenever we get pregnant next, but that we'll just have to wait and see about. But I had that appointment on May 7th, and I bled pretty much all of May. And for 2 weeks of that, in the beginning of May, it was regular. Like, it was just every day, constant. But the farther we got into May, the more it would stop for a few days and start back up. Stop and then start back up. And my HCG levels, she wanted me to go get a weekly test done. And she wanted them to get back down to non-pregnant levels, which is below 5. However, it took forever. It took forever. My first HCG draw, it dropped significantly. At 60, it went from 6,200 all the way down to like 50 some. I can't remember the exact number, but it was so significant that we were like, okay, this might be a speedy process, and that's really great, because I know that it can drag out for a lot of women, and that's normal, unfortunately, but I was hoping that I wouldn't have to deal with that, because it is hard. Everything about this is hard, and getting your blood drawn and having to wait for those levels to drop is no different. So all of May, I was stopping and starting bleeding, and I just let myself go. And I was trying to track things. I was trying to see a pattern, or I don't know. I was just waiting for it to end, and I just eventually had to let go of that idea and just let my body do whatever it needed to do to recover from this, because my body had been pregnant for 12 weeks, even if the baby hadn't been alive for all that time. So it needed some time to recuperate, and I needed to give it room to do that and not expect things to go back to normal after 2 weeks. And that was a hard pill to swallow, but in the end, I think it did benefit me. And it was in the beginning of June sometime, I had my follow-up appointment for the ultrasound. And my doctor said that everything had passed and I did not need a DNC, and that things looked pretty good. But she wanted to keep with my HCG draws because they were not yet down to non-pregnant levels, which was so irritating. And she said that after I had a regular cycle, and since the ultrasound had came back and there is obviously no pregnancy, my uterus was back down to normal size, my ovaries looked good, everything looked great on me. As soon as my levels dropped and as soon as I had my period, we could try again. And she told me that I probably wouldn't get my period until my levels went back down to 0. And it took forever for my levels to drop back down to 0. Let me get you an exact date. I miscarried on May 5th, and my levels did not drop back down to 0 until June 25th. And that was really hard for me because it took a really long time. I did end up getting my period before my levels were back to 0, which was okay, but it was just really, really difficult to go every single week and get that done. It took a really long time for my body to recuperate. I had a fairly little bit longer than normal cycle, but from what I understand from my doctor, it can be normal because I didn't have a period for 3 months. So it was just a few days longer than my normal length of a period, and it wasn't anything too bad. I normally have pretty heavy periods, and it was a heavy one, but that's not out of the norm for me. I guess this is just the part where I talk about my emotions, because that's the physical end of a miscarriage. But I think anybody who's been through one knows that there's no emotional end to it. There are still days that I'm very, very sad, and I relive a lot of it. And especially with now trying to conceive again, I've found that it's brought up emotions again. It's just something that has really shook me and broke me in ways that I didn't expect. Like I said, this was my worst nightmare, to feel like I was close to getting out of the first trimester, but I wasn't, and I didn't get to, and I lost that pregnancy. It was physically excruciating on me, and this time was just so much more different. I spent a lot of time thinking back to how happy we were and being really, really sad about that, because it was just something that we had wanted for so long, and we finally had it, and we were gonna have this November baby, and we had so many plans around it. And with being pregnant up until 12 weeks, you know, you start to make plans, you start to make ideas, and you know, you just fall in love with this concept of this is your life now. Like, my daily life also involved being pregnant, so I had to start realizing that I wasn't anymore, and just hard things like that. And I was very much living in the fact that of what we had lost, and it took a lot of time to feel anything other than that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I want to say is that it takes a long time. I'm still not all okay. And I think there's like a rush and an unspoken urgency that people have with people who are grieving about anything. Like, yeah, it sucks for like a day or two and people are willing to grieve with you, but after like a week or so, they're like, is this really still a conversation? Why are we still talking about this? And that was really hard for me because I had spent 2 months thinking that I was pregnant and planning to have a baby in November. And all of a sudden, I was expected to just reverse my life back to how it was. And there was a lot of people who expected that of me. And every time that I go through grief or loss, it always teaches me that some people show up and some people don't. A lot of the time, the people you don't think will show up will, and the people who you expect to won't. It's just, there's a lot of different things that go into the grieving process. There's no right way to grieve. Me and my husband grieve differently, completely differently. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. Like, everybody needs their own space to do what they need to do to feel better, because at the end of the day, it's their grief journey. Like, they are the ones who have to make sure that they're going to be okay at the end of the day. So nobody's right or wrong here. People can take as much time or as little time as they want. They can talk about it, not talk about it, like whatever. And for me, it was just struggling with a lot of that. And then about 2 weeks into it, I was like, I've got to stop caring what other people think. Who is anybody to say what I need or don't need to do? Because at the end of the day, it's all everything that I've experienced. So I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And taking care of myself just meant being honest with what I felt. And some days I felt like crap and other days I didn't. And that was another thing that I felt really bad about. On days where I would feel fine, like almost kind of normal, I was like, why am I not crying? You know, I wondered why I wasn't more upset, why I wasn't curled up in a ball, sobbing about things and just emotionally wrecked. And it was just like, because sometimes your emotions give you a break for a minute and just allow yourself to feel that, because the next day I felt like crap again. And it's not linear. That's one of the things I read and has stuck with me, and it's grief is not linear. It means there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. There's going to be times where you expect it and times where you don't. And it's a hard journey, and that's really what it is. It's a journey, it's a process. It's not something you can switch on or off. And that was something that I had to learn all over again, because I think I even had kind of wrong expectations for myself about everything. And slowly but surely you start to make progress, and it doesn't get better, but it gets easier to live with. It just becomes less about the grief and more about the love, almost, you know? Because my miscarriage that happened 5 years ago this November, it brings me nothing but love to think about that pregnancy and think about that joy that it brought us, and I just feel very at peace with it. And I know that one day this miscarriage will feel the same. I'm sure it's going to be a long time off, but it will, and it's a process. And I don't know, like, I'm happy that I made good memories, because I know however many years from now, when it brings me peace, I'll really, really love the fact that I have such great memories standing in Target, looking at baby clothes with my girls and my husband, and, you know, stuff like that. Like, I'm not gonna regret that. I know I'm not. And it was really hard. It was the hardest thing I think I've ever been through, and I think it really shook me as a person. But these crappy things in life happen. These horrible, horrendous things that you don't want to happen, they can happen sometimes. And it's just about trying to make it through it and just trying to put your foot in front of the other and get through it. And, you know, that's just all you can do. So I want to make this video to tell my story from beginning to end and just kind of put it in one spot for me, because I feel like it's kind of been all over the place, especially for my viewers who watched about the miscarriage but didn't really know much about the pregnancy. And it, like, that's such a good time, and I don't want them to just know the negative either. And like I said, I just hope that this helps somebody who might be going through this to know that, like, everything that you're feeling is completely normal, and I promise one day it'll feel a little bit better, and from that day things will get better. And you might have a day where you feel like crap again, and that's okay too. There's not really a good note to end this on, other than if you know somebody in your life who's going through one, just reach out and tell them that you love them and that you're thinking of them and that you're willing to be whatever they need. I think that's basically the only positive that we can end on. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I'm not going to say that I hope you enjoyed this video, but I hope it did help you. And as always, thanks for watching.